Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Ecoffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And on today's show, I have with me a very special guest, Tyler Mandroian. Tyler is the Vice President of Operations at Refract ROI, an SEO and digital marketing agency headquartered in Denver, Colorado. He's a bachelor's of business degree from Arizona State University and is a digital marketing leader with over 12 years of experience driving revenue for B2B, B2C, and e-commerce companies. When not working on marketing campaigns for clients and running the operations of his agency, Tyler enjoys bowling, archery, as well as other shooting sports and exploring the great outdoors in the Colorado wilderness with his friends and family. Tyler, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Yeah. So, hey, Tyler, what would you say is the biggest difference between the person you were in university and who you are now?
Oh, my gosh. Years and years of hard-fought lessons, I would say. Learning how to be an adult, for one, as you mentioned, Arizona State University, which, lots of stories out of there that I should probably remember. But most of it was really coming to me as a matter of focus and a matter of organization, and something that, we talk a lot about here about the agency is personal growth. It's one of the aspects of focus that we want to have and we want to train and we want to allow, our staff to have too. And one of those reasons why I'd tell you, I was probably the least organized person on the planet, coming out of college and coming out of, coming into my professional world.
Okay.
And, now anyone that I work with will tell you I'm probably the most organized person that they interact with. And it's one of those things where I would say I'm lucky enough to have the foresight, but I'm honest to God, I'm lucky enough to have been around people that are willing to tell me, my weakness and things I need to really focus on and to build. And so, by focusing on those weaknesses and that's where I got stronger in my career is by, Did you find it was more beneficial to ignore your weaknesses and find other people who could compensate that were stronger in your areas of weaknesses and just focus on your strengths? Or did you focus on your weaknesses to become more overall balanced in regards to your skill sets? It's a great question. I don't think there's a wrong or right approach to that. For me, it made sense to work on my weaknesses. I felt that I could rely enough on my strengths and intuition. If I focused on the things that I did poorly, I was going to raise my overall floor, Absolutely. And now it's funny in my own professional development, I am starting to go the other direction. I'm actually starting to work more on my strengths because I'm realizing developing those things is going to be, more beneficial, I think, to me at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's either or approach. Nothing's right or wrong. I was just curious to know what you decided to do. So, how did you first get interested in digital marketing?
I've always been really interested in marketing and advertising. I mean, since I was a kid watching commercials on TV, I always knew I was going to do something with it. I always knew that. And growing up in high school and a little bit in college, I was always a computer nerd. Like I put together my first computer towers. I took the family computer and rebuilt it probably 6 or 7 times and kept the same thing going for years and years. And so I knew about the internet. I knew about how to build things and a little bit of I would never call myself a coder, but I'd taken HTML classes and things like that. I knew I had this skill set and this interest. And really what kicked me off was playing around with photography and getting really into Photoshop. And so those two things, started to kind of collide. And so I took my first job out of college was a sales job. I was working, the phones in the East Coast. So I would get up at 4, get to the office by 6, smile and dial for 7 or 8 hours. And I realized if I did it for one more week, I was going to do something violent to myself. It was just draining. I could not do that anymore. So I decided to go back, go after something I was passionate about if I was going to be working this much for a living. And I took an internship with an ad agency that specialized in doing radio and TV ads. So I learned how to do placements in radio, TV, broadcast, more traditional advertising, the way we call it today.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we had so many small business clients that were trying to figure out how to deal with online marketing. This was 2009, 2010, 2011. A lot of businesses had websites. A lot of them didn't. And very few of them knew what to do with them, right? Like if you build a website and there it would go, right? No, waiting for the calls.
If you build it, they will come. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we started doing those things and looking into it. And I was setting up Google Analytics, that people never knew about, probably a year or two after it came out. And so just kind of started doing some services with that agency. I got hired out of that agency from a client by one of our clients to run their digital marketing full time when they really wanted to invest more into it. And so it just kind of snowballed into this, skill and interest kind of collide with work opportunities is where it came in. And so, I found myself doing all kinds of things I wouldn't think I'd be doing. I mean, I built e-commerce stores from the ground up for a tree and plant nursery in Arizona. I mean, just things that you wouldn't think, you would end up doing. But like I said, when skill and interest meet opportunity is where growth can happen. Yeah,
absolutely. So do you think the experience you gained at Toma Advertising has helped you in your development as an overall digital marketer?
Incredibly. And it wasn't even, sure, you're going to learn marketing and advertising things. I just learned so much about business. Just awesome. Getting the opportunity to talk to small business owners. We worked with a lot of Ashley Furniture home stores.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're all, so they're all individually owned, or most of them are. Right? You had some, would have, 2, 3, 4 locations. I talked to one person who I think he had 10. So you get, just different walks of life and business. And so I learned a lot just talking and having those conversations and smart enough to ask questions, right? So you learn a lot about what motivates people behind the decisions that they make. And so, I mean, my experience there was very formative to, how I approach it. I also had an agency owner at the time who had very little interest in anything that was going on there. So he was in and out in about 10 hours a week.
Interesting.
So,
how did he make that work? Wow.
Yeah. Honestly, trial and error. I mean, I think
but if he wasn't interested in digital marketing, did he just make sure he hired people who were good at it? Is that like?
Oh, I mean, he just wasn't very interested in kind of running his business, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, how do you be successful doing that? That's crazy to me.
He had his clients, and they trusted him and liked him, and he just kind of turned him over to me. And I think, after seeing me work for just a few months, I was pretty surprised by the abruptness of handing off, and frankly, the level of faith he put into me. Like, I took that to heart. Yeah. And, I mean, I worked my butt off trying to get it to work. And, I learned a lot in the process. Ultimately, I think he ended up selling the agency. I don't know if they're still around today or under flag. So I couldn't say it necessarily worked out for him in the long run, but
who knows?
I think he's happy
it worked out for you.
It worked out for me. And so I think, anyone who's grown in digital marketing, and what I actually found that was really interesting is my experience there is not necessarily all that unique. The amount of people who I've talked to who have been just thrown into the fire.
To the fire. Oh, wow.
Without a lifeline. It's common, but it's a really big opportunity for people that I think it's intimidating, but if you want to, there's a lot of people that want to do marketing.
Yeah. So, when I was at the car dealership, I didn't know, I knew the theory of digital marketing. I knew the theory of Google ads. I knew the theory of Facebook ads. I knew, you know what I mean? But I'd never executed that many campaigns, but like I knew how to set them up and how to structure them properly. And then I found people who could help me. And so you're right though, but the best way to learn is learning from taking courses is great. It gives you a knowledge and understanding of how things work, but it's not until where the rubber hits the road, if you're actually turning on a campaign to get some results, that really matters. That's where you really learn.
Oh, and experience is such a huge part of the equation. And don't get me wrong, I love how much digital marketing training there is now. I love I mean, that there are these courses that are well prepared. They'll teach you things. I mean, that level of that accessibility is something I didn't have when I was coming up in this. And so when I see people not taking advantage of that, that's just like, oh my God, I would have loved for these things, to have in my repertoire. But the experience component is so critical to that as well. And I think learning opportunities to combine the two, if you're able to do a class, but you're able to do work within a campaign as well, that experience is really important. When I was at Arizona State, I took one web development class, and I can boil the entire course down to this, which is go to w3schools.com.
Yeah. Click
on Learn HTML. Yeah. And at the end of the course, you turn in a website.
Yeah.
See you in 3 months, everybody. Yeah. And I mean, it was really that hands off. So there's so much good education out there now that should be taken advantage of. You can't just do that, so learning, the ins and outs and how campaigns actually run, it's so different. Yeah.
I notice you have a lot of certification. Are you a big believer in certification and in potential, maybe potential employees coming to work for you, investing themselves in certification? Is it a business value, a culture that you have in your agency?
It is, yeah. So I wouldn't, there are times where we've hired someone without a certification, but the first thing that we had them do was go and get that.
Okay.
If only to make sure that all of our team can talk the same language and make sure that, hey, if I say, CPC and keyword density, are those things going to make sense to you? Mm-hmm. Sure. Right. I do value them a lot. I think to me, the biggest differentiator is there's not that many things that indicate to someone that you're actually knowledgeable about digital marketing. A lot of people can talk about the basics and sound knowledgeable. Yeah. There's very few, especially like third-party entities like Google, right, that are trusted, generally well trusted across the industry. They can go, hey, this person is, X amount smart in this discipline. So I think the certifications are great. If you're trying to build your career, my God, I that's absolutely where I would tell everyone to start. And I've been in interviews with potential employees for us where I've said, hey, you might not be a great fit for us, but if you're looking for, your first agency role, get those certifications, because it's going to show people like me that you're putting in the time and effort to demonstrate that expertise, and time and effort speaks volumes.
Yeah, absolutely. How far do you think people should go with certification? For instance, there's the online marketing certified professionals. You can become an online marketing certified associate or an online marketing certified professional. And it's equivalent to a 4-year degree. It's about 5,000 hours worth of time. And you, as a OMCP, online marketing certified professional, you can really become a T-shaped marketer and specialize in one particular area of marketing. Do you think that it's a worthy goal to go after something like that?
I think it depends on your own educational background and experience. To me, that sounds like a lot. Yeah. And I think, once again, looking for opportunities where you can actually gain that experience to me is can you sit in a classroom for 4 years and learn marketing? Yeah, you're going to learn a lot doing that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I always talk about, so I've taught digital marketing for probably 6 or 7 years, and one of the things I always talk, I have a little slide that shows it, but I talk about the law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
So spending too much time in any one particular avenue, you're just going to get less and less out of it the more and more time you put into it at a certain point. So I think if everyone thinks about, where's that inflection point for them, for someone who knows nothing about business or marketing, that might be an amazing course. I don't know. But I think, if you're well-versed in business and you just need some tweaks, going through those certifications where you might spend, 40, 50, 60 hours maybe in the Google certification stack, if you've never spent any time there, that'll teach you a ton, right? So going pretty high up that curve, so to speak, of that law of diminishing returns. So I think just spreading yourself out a little bit to make sure you hit all those bases, so you're not just super concentrated in one area.
Yeah.
That's
Right on. Hey, what do you think is the key to success when it comes to implementing a successful digital marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's understanding your audience. And there's so many campaigns, so many companies, so many agencies I've worked with that just sometimes fail to do those basic blocking and tackling steps.
Yeah.
And a lot of our clients are surprised, right? When, we start working with them, the first thing we do is we take them through a 2-hour messaging process. And that's really to understand their buyers' motivations and why their product solves that problem and what differentiates them from other products.
Yeah.
Everything flows from that conversation, right? So keyword research to the KPIs that you're going to be monitoring, to how you want leads to come in, to how you're going to, differentiate between an MQL or an SQL or a hot lead or a cold lead or whatever you're going to call them, right?
Yeah.
In different, different handoff procedures and all those things. So everything to me kind of stems from, well, why does a business exist, right? Most businesses exist to solve problems. Right. And so
it's amazing.
Root, go ahead. Right? Mm-hmm. No, I was just saying, you get to that root, right? And then you can start building positive things off of it.
Yeah. It's amazing how many businesses, though, don't know what that is. Like, don't know who their audience is. They don't know who their target market is. And they haven't built any customer personas around the problem that they're trying to solve, various different customer personas. I've talked to, like I said, hundreds of marketers so far. And it's amazing how large companies, big and small, don't understand those things and don't take the time. And someone like us comes along and says, well, what is your voice of the customer? What is your who is your persona? What are your target market? What problem are you trying to solve? What is your unique selling proposition that differentiates you from your competition? And why should business choose you over someone else? And why, when they're clicking on an ad and so on and so forth. It's just very interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, Matt. But I also think it's important to remember that, business owners and the people who started these companies, they knew it at some point.
Yeah.
That's why they started the organization. That's why they got to the point where they are talking to marketers and trying to reinvest those things. And so embracing that, even though a business owner might not know what the USP might mean. And actually, I try really actively to stay away from marketing language and those, the little insider things, because, even though it's easy to intimidate people with that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think, coming in and just asking simple, basic questions and listening to the answers is the biggest thing. You're going to get some of those more original thoughts. And then the best thing can happen where you actually have that person really fired up about what got them into business in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's where you really start to get, a lot of word volume behind their motivations and starting the business, why they actually, I've been through hundreds of those conversations. If I had $1 for every time someone said, oh, we're unique because, we try the hardest, or we have great customer service.
Yeah.
That's what everyone tries to, that's what everyone else is going to say too. Right.
Yeah.
So what are those motivations that make you guys different?
Yeah.
And then we can, work on presenting those against the rest of the competition so that you look unique.
Yeah. Almost hidden marketing assets.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So if you can't focus on that buyer, you're never going to connect to them in a way that they think, oh, this, company I've never heard of, this website I've never been to can actually solve my problem. Like you're not going to accomplish that. So it sounds, people might say great website or really good tracking analytics. To me, it comes down to understanding your buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so you went from a practitioner, being a digital marketing strategist and PPC manager to becoming the director of operations at the agency. Can you tell me about that journey and how you had to pivot?
Yeah.
How much? It's one thing to, be running campaigns and things. It's a completely another thing to be managing a team of people and getting them to do those things. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, how much time you got, right? I mean, there's about 9 years of evolution and stories there, but I'll summarize by saying, I got to a point where having, I was lucky enough before I took my initial position with the agency now that I had sat on both sides of the desk. So I'd worked with agencies. I had worked, as the owner of marketing or the owner of digital marketing before. And so my whole goal with joining this organization was to actually treat clients the way I knew that they needed to be treated to see success. Okay. Frankly, we just got to the point from a sales and capacity standpoint where I couldn't do any more. I had enough clients. I had enough campaigns I was running.
Yeah.
I don't have a cloning machine. So it came down to the point where, I'm going to have to become more efficient. And that's what it came down to. Now, there's a lot of ways of gaining efficiency, right? But if I could do this through other people, and I could train some of the practices and some of the ethos and some of, get people to react in some of these situations the same way I do, and I can, and ask the right kinds of questions that are going to open up conversations. And then frankly, in most agencies, and a lot of the ones I've been around, right, they can be a little bit of oppressive environments. You have high egos in the agency world. So it's my way. You got to be doing X, Y, and Z. And so frankly, giving people the room to make mistakes, to learn things, and to create their own cadence and experiences, and then just talking with them and checking in with them allowed me to step out of that day-to-day kind of campaign management, bring people into the fold as we could afford it and scale it. Mm-hmm. And to that point now where I've got, I have a team of 9 or 10 working in the operations here full time.
Yeah. Did you develop SOPs, standardized SOPs, execute, for instance, Google ad campaigns or SEO campaigns, and then how did you go about replicating yourself? You mentioned that, for instance, did you create training videos, like in-house training videos that people could watch?
Absolutely. So and I'll date myself here a little bit. I think Loom is like the coolest thing on the planet. Had that been accessible, I would have gone about this completely differently. But standard operating procedures and the way we call it, just general manufacturing best practices around here. Marketing is creative work, but I want the execution of it to be as boring as humanly possible. Yeah. And so, what we created and we started, like all good business things, right? Came from a spreadsheet of tasks and it came from a Word document of tasks. Yeah. And developed the descriptions and, hey, when you got to do X, do Y. I had a little bit of a background in technical writing, which really helped me. I took a couple courses in college. And so very descriptive, unfortunately, long blocks of text to sort of guide people on the technical execution of what we do from SEO, because it is complicated. But also just, hey, here's how to ask those questions at the right time as well. So weaving those items into a task management system. I mean, they're a dime a dozen now. Today we use one called Rike. It's not super pop. Yeah, it's definitely gaining popularity. We've been using it for 6 or 7 years. And so
I've heard of it.
Yeah, building our So that's kind of the hub of everything. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think they're really catching on. Citrix owns them, right? Or did they buy them or something?
I think Citrix does own them. And honestly, that's probably why, because I'm sure they have a lot more marketing. I love the program because it's very flexible. And it wasn't designed for agencies, which actually really appealed to me. But it was designed honestly just for teams and communication. And so we built our own little templates and tasks. And now there's, we have these blueprints that we base off of that different team members will edit as they need to, good first plan survives, or no good plan survives first contact with the enemy. Right. So you got to adjust these things as you go through them. But because that baseline understanding is there, we're doing every client 80 or 90% the same way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that consistency is so critical to growth. Yeah.
It absolutely is. So you were able to develop SOPs and obviously started with spreadsheets and Google Docs and moved into Rike, a project management tool similar to Asana, similar to ClickUp, similar to Teamwork. Except, I've heard great things about Rike. I've been a bit of a ClickUp evangelist, and someone guest on the show told me if you like ClickUp, you should check out Rike. So yeah, the second or third person to mention it. And so then how did you, you mentioned hiring people. Like, how did you know? Obviously, cash flow in business and even in agencies is, something you have to look out for, and knowing when the capacity is of being able to skip, because there's this tug of war between sales and operations, or a balancing act. You can go out and your sales could go sell 20 clients and get 20 new websites and 20 new accounts. And you only have 6 people, and you don't have the capacity to do that.
Right.
So how did you guys develop the process of knowing when to hire, how long it would take to train someone, and so on and so forth? I mean, to me, that's fascinating in any business, especially agencies.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I'll tell you right now, it's the most difficult aspect of my job even today.
Yeah.
And you have a lot more, impacting factors. You have COVID, right? People want to work remotely. Yeah. I'm at the office, but we're only here 2 days a week.
Yeah.
I'm maybe here 10 hours a week,
okay.
And it's just to allow, for better work-life balance. I mean, like anyone else, I like working from home too. But there are those intangibles you get from being here. And so we're just trying to balance those things out. But to answer your question, it's, sometimes you have to make, the decision is always carries a little bit of risk. And there are times that you have to decide whether you're going to invest in capacity or if you're going to, bank profits for another day. One of the biggest lessons we had to learn at this agency, when it was me and the president, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
We had to learn how to charge what we are worth.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's such a big
lesson.
It's such a big struggle for especially small agencies, because you're just trying to
win business. Yeah, absolutely.
And so once you figure that out, there's such price elasticity to what we do. I've seen the same website get developed for $2,000 that I have for $20,000. And over my.
I know exactly. I knew guys who were charging $13,000 for a $3,000 website. I'm just like, wow, did you ever just rip that person off? But hey, if they thought they got value for their money, have at her. If they aren't upset, and I know better, but so how do you
willing to pay it?
Yeah, if they're willing to pay it. It's interesting because when you go to scale an agency or any business, it's like there's a book called Profit First. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a phenomenal book. And he talks about figuring out your profit first. Yeah. And transforming your business from a cash eating monster to a money making machine. Who's the guy who wrote it? But it's like that, Mike, whatever, his last name is impossible to say. But anyway, you guys obviously figured something out, because let's face it, we just talked about developing the SOPs. Do you then, here's a common business principle I've heard, and I wonder if you guys adopted this. And by the way, you can plead the fifth on anything you want to, in case you don't want to reveal things about the agency that would rather be, kept under.
We're a pretty open book. Don't worry about me.
So for instance, you just talked about those SOPs, right? So let's say I've developed some SOPs of my own, and timing. One business mentor told me, Matt, you need to time yourself in 15-minute increments and record what you're doing every 15 minutes in order to know how long things are taking you. He goes, you need to be able to do things before you can train other people to do things. And then once you've done those things, make training videos, show people how to do them. And then, you figure out what your cost per action is in regards to those things. And then you figure out, your overhead, how much you got to pay for, your skills, all of those things factor into all that. And it literally comes down to that cost per action plus all your costs, your hard costs of your labor, your overhead, so on and so forth. And then multiplying that by 3 is what I've been told by people, because you want to pay 1/3 to pay for operations, 1/3 to pay for sales, and the other 1/3 to pay out to shareholders. If that's what I heard right when that person told me that. But flip, man, that's a lot of you almost need data analysis, data tools. Right. I know there's some tools out there nowadays, there's some data tools out there nowadays that enable you to do that. But my gosh, I think I can't remember what it's called, but I know of such one. It's like an accounting program. that literally tells you what your cash flow is. You're like on a day-to-day basis based on your profit and loss and your books. I mean, that's flipping. That's when that's when it comes very interesting, because you're no longer like executing Google ad campaigns. Growing a marketing agency is like, you got to know about business. So I guess what I'm trying to find out is like, how the heck you talked about price elasticity? How do you know, figuring out your pricing? And smaller agencies out there that might be listening to this going, yeah, man, I'm working like, when I first started, I had a guy go out and sell $20,000 worth of work for $5,000 to 4 different businesses and put all the work on me. And it was nuts. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. I didn't even have enough money and margin to outsource it to get any help. And guess what? I burned through all those 4 because they're also pissed off because it was taking so long that I never retained any of them. So that there we go with the balancing act between sales and operations. Like, how do you balance that?
And I'll tell you, we learned a lot of hard lessons trying to figure that out. The only thing I'll plead the fifth on, so to speak, is the breakup in this agency that happened. That was transformational for us about 7 years ago. We had 2 co-owners, and one of them understood this, and the other didn't. And it caused a really big rift, and when I kind of took, my position here, I'd summarize the objective as this, which is in most agencies, in a lot of companies, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to see operations and you're going to see sales, and there's almost always conflict between those two.
Yeah.
There almost always is. Sales doesn't know what operations is. Operations doesn't know what sales is doing.
Yeah.
Getting that gap bridged, I think, is the key to any successful business. I don't care what you're doing.
Okay.
For us, it was incredibly important that the products and solutions started coming from operations and not necessarily sales.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that philosophy.
So we developed, right now today, we have less, the biggest we've ever been is right now, we have less products than we've ever had. We have 4 lines of service that we do, right? Cool. It's web development, SEO, paid search, and content. Those are the 4 things that we really do. And because we actually started focusing on those, we could make them more efficient. And just like you said, right, I was in a position where I had to balance my time working in the business and working on the business, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you've heard from other people.
And and
it's a tough balance. But, once again, that law of diminishing returns is huge there. If I was spending 20% of my time working on the business, that would, reduce my time doing those things. So those upfront time investments that I knew would pay off on the back end were really critical to making myself more efficient so that I could build off time. So I could do those things like hire a contract, take on something that's pretty easy and straightforward. And actually, once again, charging what it is that you're worth. So figuring out, reasonable. And I think, it's at a certain point, and if there are any, small agencies, listening to this right now, trying to figure out how to do this, you just got to take a deep breath. You got to swallow hard, and you just got to do it. You just got to put the price out there that you think you're worth.
Yeah.
And know that you're good enough to justify it, because a lot of people are, and a lot of small businesses and small agencies get taken advantage of because they don't charge enough.
Yeah.
The other side of it, right? You can't do what we were talking about earlier, and you can't charge $15,000 for a $5,000 website.
No, because once they find that out,
so
you'll never have them as a client ever again.
I watched a medical device company pay $95,000 for a 5-page website.
That should be fraud.
I'm not sure it's not. And
up here, like everybody knows, I'm in Canada right now. If someone could easily complain to there's certain organizations up here, like the Competition Bureau, and there's even one on a province level, aka state level, that you could get in trouble for that up here. I'm not sure, depending on where you are in the States, if that's. But there's not a governing body I'm aware of that really deals with those things.
pricing and services and marketing like agreements. I mean, I'm sure if you're egregious enough, someone can take you to court over it. But that's kind of another aspect of growing a small business is you're going to deal, and we've talked about this as well, but you're going to deal with people who don't do what they say they're going to do. Yeah. And learning and understanding that. I'll tell you the other biggest thing that had to happen in order for us to grow is documentation. Documentation and best practices. And once again, right, I'm like the least organized, naturally person on the planet. Yeah. Everything I do is very well documented. And did you find that when you pivoted your roles, you spent less time learning about digital marketing and more time learning about business and business processes and operations? Oh my gosh. And those things? Well, once again, right, that's what I had to learn in order to do what I was trying to do. And so which excited me, right? I love to learn. I love education. And I think when you keep learning, right, you're in the right position. Yeah. If you're not learning anymore, you got to do something else. Cause that's how I build my own, personal equity or whatever you want to call it. But I found myself, really having to focus on those things. I mean, I do way more accounting, and financial analysis now than I ever did before. Yeah. Those are strengths I've had to, I knew a little bit, right? And I had to build on those strengths. Yeah. But I strike a very careful balance now because I don't want to lose those marketing chops that I've developed over the last, several years. So I make a point of it to maintain at least 20 to 30% of my responsibilities to still consult with clients. I actually am doing, it's not a completely volunteer role. I've got a small equity stake in the company, but I'm sitting in the board of directors right now for an app, a new scheduling type app that actually, back to our earlier conversation, it shows like a self-reflection of how you spend your time. So across like health, occupation, just like social. And so all these different aspects of how you spend your time so you can get the reports and kind of align your own priorities on what you want to be, right? Whole reason why I'm doing that is so that I can continue to do that ground floor marketing stuff. Because that's a skill set that, I know I can use to feed my family, right? Keep doing it. Yeah, absolutely. So you need to keep it sharp. Yeah. That's the thing with digital marketing. You always got to be keeping it sharp, even having I know one SEO guy in Australia, he scaled his agency from just himself. He's got over 50 employees now and he's expanding into the UK. And he had a business person who was responsible for bringing in a certain chocolate company into the Australia market and in manufacturing, mentor him in business. And if it weren't for him developing learning those skill sets from that person, I'm not sure if he would be as successful as he is today. But he said there's a lot of correlation and similarities between manufacturing and running a marketing agency, because whereas we're manufacturing a piece of chocolate, you're manufacturing a link or a piece of content or an outcome and knowing. And I think that's a lot of weaknesses of a lot of marketers, because we're good at marketing and we want to start our own agencies. And we're like, holy smokes, there's a whole lot more to doing this, a whole lot more business. At least I learned that hard lesson of that, business skills. And so I kind of think that once you learn about marketing, maybe people should, I think it was Tyra Banks. She one time went to a Harvard business. She got after a degree or something in Harvard business certificate or something. And she just was amazed at how learning about all these different things that are involved in business. And sometimes I think, before you start a marketing agency, maybe continue to work in your role, but in freelance or whatever, but develop some business acumen. Would you say take some business courses? I looking back, I kind of wish I'd done that. Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of individual proprietors, we'll call them, really struggle. I won't mention his name or company, but in particular, a web developer I worked with for years. Really knowledgeable guy, very smart, very capable, amazing web developer. Really struggled to own and run his own business. Working 80-hour weeks. had one person who he didn't really have the time to manage or explain things. So all he was doing was putting out fires. And he had himself stretched so thin, partially because he probably wasn't charging what he's worth, and probably because he wasn't setting the lines with his clients on, this is the statement of work, this is what I will do, and outside of this is going to cause issues, right?
And
so because he wanted to earn that work, because he wants to say yes to everybody. And you can do those things as a consultant. You can do those things working for another company. But running your own business and not putting up those guide rails and then sticking to them with consistency, it's a recipe for disaster. Not that you can't pull yourself out of it if that's where you're at, but that I've seen so many people who are good marketers, great people, good people skills, just fall into that trap because there's so many ways you can go about growing a business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you gotta focus. If you can't focus on fewer things,
that's important, isn't it? To not, because there's so many agencies that are full service agencies, but it's like, well, unless you have 200 people, how are you even able to offer all of those things? So it's better to focus at, to be good at a few things than to be mediocre at a whole bunch of things.
Absolutely. Well, and people don't, I don't want to pay for mediocrity. I'm sure you don't either.
Nope.
You want to pay someone who's good at what they do. So be who you are.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just, and it sounds so basic, but I mean, just being who you are is going to set yourself up for so much more success than trying to be what everyone else wants.
Absolutely.
You're just gonna burn so much time, effort, and energy that I've seen a lot of people lose the fire and passion that got them, to this point in the first place, where this is what they really wanted to do. And these weren't things, I mean, I was lucky enough to know that, I was very lucky in the opportunities that I've had to see a lot of these lessons be learned. I've learned a lot of them myself. But I think people just get to a point where they just struggle. And they just don't know how to get past where they're at.
Yeah.
And to me, it comes down to focusing back on the basics. Marketing is no different in that sense either than business.
Yeah. Hey, it's been it's amazing how fast time has gone by, and we could talk for another hour or so.
Yeah.
And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. How can our listeners get in touch with you online if they choose to do so?
Oh, well, there's numerous ways. We're having our site, new sites coming up live about the time when we're expecting this podcast to come out at Refract ROI.com.
Refract ROI.com. Right on.
Refract ROI.com. Yeah.
And are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn. Yep. So
right
LinkedIn,
on.
Tyler Mandroian, and I'm sure everyone knows how to spell it. But no, happy to connect with anyone or answer any questions. Honestly, this is what I do day in, day out. So I love talking about it. Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure we put those links in the show notes. But I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute blast talking to you.
Oh, Matt, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Right on. You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.